Good evening and welcome to this evening's talk on the Call of Abraham. Here we find a time in God's Word when God speaks to Abraham and gives him some very, very clear instructions. So let's pitch in this evening and let's start in Genesis chapter 12. Let's read it together, and it says, "Now the Lord said to Abraham, get out of your country, from your family, from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. And I will make you a very great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in all your families of the earth you shall be blessed." So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. You see, here we find this important message given to Abraham. But before we actually get into the actual message, let's actually look at a little bit of background to Abraham and his family so that we get an understanding of the way in which God was speaking to the people of Israel at that particular time. So it says in God's Word here in Genesis 11, picking up in verse 27, and it says, "This is the genealogy of Terah. And Terah begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran begot Lot, and Haran died before his father Terah in his native land in Ur of the Chaldeans. Then Abraham and Nahor took wives. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, and the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. But Sarai was barren, and she had no children. And Terah took Abraham, his son Abram, his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the son of Abraham's wife, and they went with them out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. So the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran." You see, what is important for us to see at this sort of point in time, it gives us part of the family tree of Abram. You see, in verse 31, we reread that Terah had a call to go to Canaan. But you see, we read in that verse that it said he got distracted en route. One of the most important things for us these days is to be those who actually fulfill the call which God has given us. And you see, what happened was, whilst dwelling in Haran, it may have seemed really good to him, an important thing, all of God's provision. You see, Haran was a place called the caravan route. It was the place when all of the trades that were going through that area passed and stopped. But you see, what happened was for Haran was it may have seemed really good to live and to dwell there, but actually he failed on his calling because he stopped halfway. And you see, in verse 32, you see he had plenty of life left in him. It's estimated he was about 145 when he got to Haran. He'd still got a few years left in his life, because actually he was going on to live till 205. But so that before we actually get into the bit with Abraham, let's now have a look at the family tree in a little bit of detail. So here we go. Here we find this particular image. So at the top here we find Terah, and it's estimated, and we can read in God's Word, that he was about 70 years old when he actually gave birth, or he had these three sons, Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Now Haran married, we don't know who Haran was married to, but he had three children, Lot, Milcah, and Iscah. He had all of those while he was still in the Ur of the Chaldeans. But what is interesting is that Haran died, and then it is estimated that about 145 years old, Terah got this call to leave and to go on. And you see, he left with Abram and Lot. Now, just to fill in the family tree here, Nahor actually married Milcah, who was the daughter of Haran. And they went on, as it says in Genesis 22:20, they actually had 8 children. But here we see, moving on to Haran, we had Terah, Abraham and his wife, and Lot. And they lived in Haran. And they were met there. And the interesting thing is, if you like, is that from Ur to Haran, that distance was actually 700 miles. And from Haran to Canaan of Galilee, which is where he stopped, was actually another 700 miles. He got stuck halfway on the journey. So let's continue, and let's go back to what we were looking at before, and let's move on as far as going on is concerned. So let's turn back to Genesis chapter 12, and here we find that God speaks to Abraham in very, very clearly. And you see, one of the things is that he actually made some amazing promises to Abraham in Genesis chapter 1. And it says, "Now the Lord had said to Abraham, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you." This is what he was spoken to when he was actually in Haran with his father. He'd been there with his father, assuming that actually they were all going to move on to Canaan. But as I said, his father got stuck halfway, and that is such disappointment. But you see, he says to Abraham the following blessing. It says, "I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing." You imagine what it was like when he received that from God. That's a particular blessing there. And then he goes on to say, he says, "I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And in all your families of the earth shall be blessed." In other words, his offspring were going to be blessed. And if you remember, at this particular point in time, he had no children. So he must have wondered, how on earth was that going to happen? And maybe on another message, we'll pick up on that some more. So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And you see, God was really, really speaking to him. And he set out on this particular journey. And let's continue to read through the passage. And we move on into Genesis 12 and verse 5, where it says the following. "Then Abraham took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan." Look, God had blessed them with not only people, but also possessions. This was a great crowd who were moving on their way to Canaan. You see, what did God say in his word? He said, "I will bless you. I will multiply you." And God had already started this multiplication process with Abraham by the people he'd gathered. So he came to the land of Canaan. And he says, "Abraham passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the Terebinth tree in Moreh. And the Canaanites were in the land." If you remember, the Canaanites were going to be a pain to the children of Israel over and over again through various parts of history. And then God made a blessing to him, and he said, "Then the Lord appeared to Abraham." This was the second time God had appeared to him, and said to him, "Your descendants I will give this land." And there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. You see, altars in the Old Testament were a sign of covenant, because what happens at a covenant, at an altar? Blood is shed. And the important thing that we find in the Bible is wherever blood is shed, there a covenant is made. And we will see later on, Abraham cut several covenants during his life. But also, if you like, when Jesus died on the cross, that was a mark of a new covenant being made when Jesus died and blood was shed and there was a sacrifice. And you see in verse 8 it then says, "And he moved there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai to the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord." See, God was continually revealing stuff to Abraham as he travelled. So important for us to be the people of God who are understanding God's continuous revelation to us in our lives, to hear God speak from his word into our lives, occasionally hearing in the prophetic. It's vital that we hear that as God moves us on. And we find that in verse 8 they had this journey. And what's important, that they actually went through this journey and fulfilled it. So many people start off meaning well as their walk with their Christian walk, but actually fail to actually do that which God has called them to, or they get stuck halfway. And that's important. You see, Abraham didn't get stuck halfway. So let's just have a quick look at the map before we move on. So here is this map. And you see, Abram started out here with his father. His father was going to take them all the way round here, down into the land that he was going to promise to them. And if you see, as I've already mentioned, they travelled up here. They travelled along this route, along the edge of following the Euphrates, because that would have given them water for their animals and to keep them going. And that was the major trade route. And you see, what happened was, instead of just following the path up and round, they went up into Haran, this major trading centre, and that's where Abram's father got stuck. Looked good, probably, lots of people. He was able to join in, but he got stuck there, because then Abram carried on following this route here all the way down into Shechem and to various other places that we find in the land. And it is so important to keep going when it comes to doing those bits and pieces that God has called us to. But let's, for the moment, and for this particular message, let's now jump on into the New Testament, into Acts and chapter 10, because that's important for us to understand that particular passage. So let's jump into Acts chapter 10 and let's have a look here, where it says the following. In Acts chapter 10, it says, there was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of what would have been called the Italian regiment, a devout man, one who feared God with all his household, who gave alms generously to the people and prayed to God always. So here we find this Gentile. Here was a man, he'd been sent by the Romans, a centurion of this regiment. But look what he did is he gave alms generously to the people, such that he actually built a synagogue for the Jewish people in the place called Caesarea. And also he said he prayed to God always. He was a believer in God, and that was important. And you see, he blessed the Jewish people in a big way. And we pick up in verse 3, it says, about the 9th hour of the day, he saw a clear vision of an angel of God coming in and saying to him, Cornelius. Can you imagine what that was like? I always remember years ago a particular preacher called Eric Delve. He always described angels as being 6 foot tall and made of lightning. We always used to chuckle at that, but I guess that was his reaction, Whenever we see an angel appear in the Bible, one of the things that often people say is, the angel says, do not fear. Have a look at some of the examples where angels appear in the New Testament. Okay, let's carry on reading. And it said, and when he observed him, he was afraid and says, what is it, Lord? So he said to him, your prayers and your alms have come up for a memorial before me. You see, God sent an angel and he acknowledged in verse 4, he says, look, your prayers and your giving to the Jewish people, I've heard and I've seen what you've been up to. You see, nothing can be hidden from God. And he then says in verse 5, it says, send men to Joppa and send for Simon, whose surname is Peter. He is lodging with Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the sea, and he will tell you what you must do. And when the angel had spoken and departed, Cornelius called 2 of his household servants and a devout soldier from those who waited on him continually. You see, he was obedient to God's word. He acknowledged what God had said to him. And therefore he turns that word into action. And that's one of the things we need to do. When God speaks, we need to act. Not like Abraham's dad, who only half acted, but actually like Abraham, who acted on the whole thing and went on the full way. So let's jump on through Acts chapter 10. We could spend a long time looking at what happened to Peter, how Peter was called, how Peter made his way to Cornelius' house. But for the sake of this particular message, let's leave that out and let's jump on to the end of Acts and chapter 10, where it says the following. And it says, Peter spoke to Cornelius and to his household. And it says, while Peter was still speaking these words, the Holy Spirit fell on those who heard the word. You see, God blessed Cornelius with salvation and the Holy Spirit. And in verse 45 it says, those of the circumcision who believed were astonished. The circumcision, that's the Jewish people, were astonished, as many as came with Peter, because the gift of the Holy Spirit had been poured out on the Gentiles also. You see, God heard Cornelius's prayers, heard his blessing, and blessed him back so much more. And it says in verse 46, for they heard them speaking with tongues and magnifying God. And then Peter answered, can anyone forbid God? Here we are. Can anyone forbid water, that those who should not be baptized, who have received the Holy Spirit just as we have? And he commanded them to be baptized in the name of the Lord. And they stayed with him a few days. The question then is, well, where were they baptized? Where could they be baptized? In Capernaum? I would suggest they were baptized in the washing baths in the synagogue that Cornelius had himself built for the Jewish people. Can you imagine what a testimony that would have been? All the Jewish people seeing the Roman centurion coming in. As we will read, if we were to read in the rest of the story, we can actually see that the whole of the synagogue would have been gathered in there to see what was going on, because many others got saved as a result. And this was the baptizing of the first Gentiles in the early church. And so that would have been quite a testimony to what was going on among the Jewish people at that time. Can you imagine the scene? So there we find he blessed Israel and God blessed him. And if we look back to that passage again in Genesis chapter 12 and verse 3, it says, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And in all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Who would have known when Abraham that this man Cornelius, who blessed the Jewish people, God would bless him back? But there's also a warning there for us as well. It says, you know, I will curse those who curse you. We have to be very careful what we do. But if we read in Psalm 126, it says the following. It says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, that they may prosper who love you. Peace be within your walls, and prosperity within your palaces. That prosperity they're talking about there, that's not having our pockets lined with money. We can be prospered by God, as we can see Cornelius was prospered by God. Because you see, one of the things is that we need to be in the centre of God's will. And one of the most important things that we are called to do, as it says here in Psalm 126, is if nothing else, we need to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I'll tell you one thing, that if you do that, you will find God will honour you with peace in your own lives. So there we go. That's a very short exhortation to us. It's been recorded for you to actually see and to look again. And may I encourage you to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and to bless the Jewish people, particularly in the days going forward, as they are having a difficult time at the moment. May God bless you as you revisit some of his scriptures.